Good to have you back. Again, we're talking about blues in the key of E. I've got a backing track queued up here. What I'd like to do is sort of discuss a little bit what a blues is, especially a basic 12-bar blues like this. The last video we just discussed the turnaround, and now I'd like to discuss what a blues is harmonically speaking. We have three dominant seventh type chords here. That means it's a 4-note chord. Each one of these chords is derived from a Mixolydian mode. Now I'm just going to play a Mixolydian mode in closed position here. So we have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. Flat 7. Flat 7. Flat 7 down there. The only difference between a major scale and a Mixolydian mode is the Mixolydian mode has a flat 7, and that flat 7 gives us the dominant seventh chord sound. In the case of an E7, our notes would be E, G sharp, B, and D, right? 4 notes. So back to sort of the idea of the explaining what's happening harmonically in a 12-bar blues. Normally, like if you take a tune, like I'm just thinking of All of Me right now. If I take a tune like All of Me, it starts on C, and then it moves to an E7, and because it's moving to an E7, oh, this is sort of interesting. The E7 sort of wants to go to the A7, and that's exactly what happens here in a 12-bar blues. The E7 wants to lead to the tonal center of A. And then we have the same thing happening here with the B7 chord, which also wants to lead to the E, right? Because it's the 5 chord in the key of E. But in a blues, what's happening over and over again is tonal platforms. In effect, what we're doing here, we're playing in the key of E Mixolydian. And then when we make that change to the next chord, now we're in the key of A Mixolydian. We're no longer in the key of E Mixolydian. There's different ways to express this, but we're just focusing on sort of the foundation of what's happening here. The bedrock of the blues, let's call it that. And then we move back to E7, which implies we're E Mixolydian, because that's where the chord is derived from. Then we move to the B7, which is B Mixolydian, A Mixolydian, E Mixolydian, and then B Mixolydian. So what happens with the blues is it moves into tonal platforms, and we play each one of those tonal platforms. This may be really different from what you're used to doing. You may be just used to doing a blues scale, and when the chords change, you keep playing the blues scale, and you just use your ears and make the chord changes happen, because the blues scale has an A note in it, right? Blues scale has the G note in it. Both are notes from the A7 chord. So if you have really good ears, you're probably making the chord changes anyway. However, there are some notes that aren't going to be produced by playing a blues scale over all the changes. For instance, in the key of E Mixolydian, or in the E7 chord, we have the G sharp. So there's my G sharp, and it's a nice note to get in order to define that chord. The same thing will go for the A7. There we have the C sharp. We don't have that in the blues scale, right? But it's there in the chord, so why not define it? And the same thing will go for the B7. In B7, we have the D sharp. right? A7, E7. When we look at it more from a chordal perspective, like where do each of these chords come from, we have to say that they come from the Mixolydian mode. As a matter of fact, in each case, 4 of the notes of the E7 chord come out of the Mixolydian mode. So you've only got 3 notes left that are not in the E7 chord, right? And those are color tones like the 13 and the 9 and the 4 to a degree. But you do have the 13 and you have the 9, right? And the same thing is going to hold true for the A7, and the same thing is going to hold true for the B7. So what you're doing is playing through tonal platforms. Now, let me just try to move through this once, and I'll try to define these Mixolydian modes, or more clearly define the chord tones. Let's see if we can do this. And so on. Yeah, I think that gave you an idea. If you're just playing straight ahead blues scale, you're not going to have those opportunities of defining the chords. As you can see, I sort of moved toward chord shape ideas a couple of times, which works great. For instance, I'm thinking in the key of E here. Key of E, when I move here. Obviously, I'm in the key of A, right? E, I can... And you can tell that I've changed chords now, right? I'm on... Right? B... There's E. On both of those, I played every single note in the Mixolydian mode, those last 2 chords that I just played. What this is all about is not a bunch of licks, right? We all have some half-decent licks. But what this is about is how to understand what's happening in the blues and how to think over the chords of the moment. Think of that word platform. What I'm doing is defining harmonic platform. Here, the harmonic platform is E Mixolydian. Here, it's A Mixolydian. Here, it's B Mixolydian, right? That doesn't mean you have to play all the notes of the Mixolydian mode when you get to a chord, but it does suggest that all of the notes of the Mixolydian mode will work against the chords. And this is known as playing over changes, if you will. The same kind of thinking is going to lead you to more difficult tunes. At first, this approach to soloing and thinking may seem difficult, but I can assure you that over time, if you work on this kind of idea, it's going to become actually simpler to play over changes rather than try to define I could play this scale, or I could play this scale, or I could play this altered scale, or I could play in this key. That's a real nightmare. It's better to just take a look at the chord, ask yourself, where does this chord come from? In this case, the chord comes from E Mixolydian. They're the notes that you can use, right? It's pretty straightforward and pretty simple, and if you look at it that way, you're not going to be making any mistakes. Now, if you're used to just playing a minor pentatonic scale or a blues scale, this is sort of the next level. If you listen to other styles of playing, like I don't know how, obviously don't know what style you play, but since we're looking at a blues, listen to some good country players. They're good country players are nailing the changes all the time. And good jazz players should be doing the same thing. That's what I've got to say today. There are obviously ways that you can approach this. I would suggest approaching it simply, since I've mentioned the Mixolydian mode. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's my flat 7. Flat 7. So play, get used to playing a chord and playing the Mixolydian mode underneath that chord. Same would go here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, flat 7. Right? You can move the same Mixolydian mode up for the B7. There's the flat 7, flat 7, flat 7, flat 7, flat 7, flat 7, and so on, right? Thinking chordally, thinking where does the chord come from, where was the chord derived from, and then putting that underneath the chord that you're playing, the chord of the moment, to give you a template of the notes that are going to sound right. I'm going to link this backing track to the description and leave a comment. Comments really help me. Please leave a comment. That would be really good. Thanks very much for stopping by, and we'll see you real soon.